Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are in the Socrates and Jesus, a Dialogue in Heaven book today. It is a banger. Oh my goodness. Let's review what we covered last time. We saw the significance of this new way of reading where we collect questions, puzzles along the way. We carry them in our inventory, in our Q sack for our questions. And we also do our best to pull out the quotes from the text, pull out the pieces from the book itself, not bringing in anything from other books or our own personal beliefs. And we try and arrange those quotes in an order or in a way that answers those questions. Ideally in the order that reflects the dialectic, as it seems to be the structure of understanding itself. And we carry those conclusions as hypotheses. We don't know if it's true, it's not knowledge. But we may be able to confirm it's true with an experience of knowledge, which understanding itself, this collecting of these quotes to answer our question, prepares us for. So it prepares us for a vision of knowledge, which may confirm whether or not our hypothesis is true. So we have an if sack for our hypotheses and a Q sack for our questions, and we carry them along with us as we read. And we saw the significance of doing that yesterday, because we carried a bunch of questions and we created a few hypotheses. And as we read, the text came to life for us. It became significant. I was ranting about how much of a banger this book is. And I asked the question, of all of the puzzles you've solved, of all of the games and books and movies that you've applied yourself and your mind to, how significant are these questions? So this way of reading brings a dusty old text. It's not dusty, it's pretty kick-ass, but it brings a text to life. Makes it meaningful, makes it important, makes it significant, gives it the ability to change you, evolve you. And what we saw last time while reading is those changes in your sense of self that come from those insights, you can reflect on and realize in those moments of insights, there is no self-image. And you can therefore realize that what you are experiencing is your soul or yourself outside of time. Or, to use the quote from the text, which was pretty well said, step out of that temporal passing phase of being, the timelessness of reality. So while our functioning in this understanding and reading is in time, our existence is outside of time and in the eternal. How neat is that? The significance of carrying questions and ifs or hypotheses as we read. So what were those questions that we were carrying? Here they are on board. If dream analysis is so important for the two fundamental tasks that we're involved in, uncovering and removing the false beliefs that limit our development, limit our freedom, limit our growth, or philosophical midwifery. And the second activity, well, using that freedom to continue to develop our understanding in that way we've just described, opening ourselves up for insight into reality, into eternity and the timelessness, and of course, recognizing through not our experience won't tell us this, our experience will tell us it's the ultimate, but through understanding, realizing that even that experience of knowledge is the penultimate, and it must itself have a cause. So developing and using understanding to free ourselves from beliefs and continue to develop to our excellence. So, if dream analysis is so important, how exactly do we do it? What's the language of the dream maker? Second question we were carrying. How exactly does participation work? If all beautiful things are beautiful because they participate in beauty, if all just things, all minds, all goodness is because of a participation in one of the aspects of being, the eidos, how exactly does the eternal or the timeless affect our physical world through participation? Equally so, if our goal is to unite, unify, join with, participate with mind itself, how does that work? Third question. If our goal as evolving human beings, our necessary stage of evolution, if we want to save our species from the terrible injustice we're suffering and the soon extinction of our species, then we have to recognize our job is to move from belief-based cognition, which isn't about truth. Are your sexist beliefs true? Are your racist beliefs true? Are all the thousands of non-religions that aren't yours true? Of course you would say they're not. Therefore we can conclude belief has nothing to do with truth. Imitation, the appearance of truth when we were little. So, believing someone else, again, but also the cause of problems, because you have to reject understanding and ousia, self-reflection. You have to reject your own development, the own meaning. You have to reject the significance and meaning of selves, minds, states of being, and understanding. The very things that are very important for us to see the significance of. Therefore, if these are needed to benefit, believers can't make, they can only break. So, politicians start wars and shit. Clergy steal money from their followers and shit. You never build a computer using religious beliefs or political beliefs. You never learn how to fly a plane or do surgery. That requires understanding. So belief-based cognition is a breaker. Kill people. And they genocide people. And because they don't have a feeling of knowingness, they mistake that feeling of hurting and crushing, breaking, for knowledge, so therefore sadistic. So if that's the cause of human problems, a special class of belief especially, but in general, belief-based cognition to understanding-based cognition, what then is the feeling state? What's the state of mind or state of being in that cognitive functioning, of being what we should be evolving into? What's it feel like so we can recognize it? We can recognize the internal conflict of being a believer. We can recognize the external conflict they create. And we can even recognize the sadism when people in power seem to enjoy hurting their employees or their slaves or the minorities in the country. Cruelty is the point. Or when belief-based thinkers jump into somebody's chat room and all they can do is criticize and hurt people and try and cause conflict. We recognize that state of being, one of internal conflict, and that of breaking, and that of sadism. But what's the state of mind or being of the cognitive functioning of understanding? A new question, one of the significance of carrying questions is you can discover more questions. In answering this question, or carrying this question as we read, a new question came to light. What's the state of the one self? We've been talking about what it's like to be in being, or knowledge, and all of the superlative, the highest language and the highest descriptors that we have. Beauty itself, being, knowledge, along with understanding we get wisdom, bliss. But what's the state that is higher, greater, higher, and transcendent, and the cause of it, the self? Because we saw in the text a description of the state of understanding being a kind of shadow of the openness, freedom, clarity, and purity of the functioning of pure mind, which gives us two puzzles: freedom, openness, freedom, clarity, and purity. If this is bliss, knowledge, then what exactly is understanding a shadow of? And could it be the self? Don't know, but we can carry an hypothesis. Therefore, if knowledge is bliss, ultimate beauty, can we say that these terms, what were they? Openness, freedom, clarity, pureness. Is this a descriptor of the state of mind of being in the one self? We'll carry that in our if sac as we continue on our quest. Now, but along with that hypothesis, we have birthed a new question, because that quote, remember these are all from the text, said, hey, by the way, it's a shadow of the functioning of pure mind, capital M. Well, if this is pure mind, does that mean that when we reach our ultimate goal, not our penultimate, which is this one, our ultimate goal of the state of self, does that also involve a functioning with or through pure mind? In other words, do we get both? The state of being of self and functioning through pure mind. Kind of makes sense. Like if this experience is necessary for the model of beauty and justice, which we've learned, it's our civic duty to demand an understanding and knowledge of for all political and spiritual leaders, because that's the model of beauty and justice. If you don't demand that, as we demand a understanding and knowledge of the model of the body for every doctor and surgeon, planes for every pilot, cars for every mechanic, so too for every political and spiritual leader, this is necessary for our functioning in the physical world of becoming the physical world. Well, you don't want to leave it. You don't want to throw it out in the trash just because we've gone beyond it. So could we be in the state of the self while still functioning with that model of justice and beauty? Would make sense. which is reflected in the description of being in understanding, because the description was, its activity is in time, but its state of mind is timeless or is in eternity, eternal. Meaning that state of understanding that we're after seems like our functioning is in the physical world in time, but our state of being is timeless. Which kind of fits with the hypothesis, or what we got from the text, is that this is a shadow of something else. So if the cognitive functioning of, which we're after, understanding, involves a functioning in a lower realm, or the lesser, and a state of being in the greater, could that be a shadow? What could that be a shadow of? Well, if that's a lesser version of something, well, the only thing left would be this as the functioning and this as the state of being, giving its reflection or shadow as this as the state of being and this is the functioning. How interesting. Now again, it's a hypothesis, so it goes into our if sac. What is the state of being that we're after in understanding, and what is the state of the oneself? And our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th question here is, why is it so difficult to talk about this? Why is it so difficult to share this good information that's true, that benefits everyone, individually and collectively? It's simply rational. Therefore, you can use this way of thinking to make ordered and rational your own soul and our species. It's necessary for removing problems, individually and collectively. And once you say it out loud, it's obvious. Hey, we move from belief to understanding and everything else. To become a vet, to become a pilot, to become a mechanic, to become a surgeon. It's all the same. And every time your beliefs come in, they cause a problem. But why is it so difficult to share what's so good, true, beneficial, rational, necessary, and obvious? These are our questions. One clue about that was Jesus saying in the book, the many don't want to be taught, they want to be entertained. But we have entertainment here because listen to this.
I'm too pure.
See?
Can't you just engage with anything in a way that's...
Hey, whoa. Who asked you? Okay, go ahead.
Disgusting. I'm so disgusted.
I'm cute. Like, it's cutie pie.
See? Lots of noises. All right, that was a bad example. So that's where we are. Let's keep reading. Let's start from the haters. The haters full of haterade, spewing their hateful hate venom. It's good that we have the haters come in though, because well, we have to deal with haters, I guess, but also ourselves, we will have negative reactions to this. Ah, come on. You're telling me there was no Easter? Get out of town. You're telling me that you can experience the mind of the God that creates every moment? Get out of here. Telling me that it actually cares about me and communicates with me in my dreams? What? I've never heard that before. You're telling me that we can simply understand all human problems with one goddamn word? Belief? What? That seems a bit simple. Plus, I like my beliefs. I don't want to dismiss them. Even if you do tell me I'll be better off with understanding and happier, we all have this feeling. It's good that we have a dramatic representation of these doubts that come up for us. Socrates. Let's keep reading from there. Here we go. The chorus comes in the white over here. Here is another so-called analysis, and it is empty as empty can be. Analogies again, phooey on them. You can't do anything with them, and none of them can be confirmed. The cornerstone of Christianity, Paul, is dismissed with a few words. He is the one that made the resurrection perfectly clear. Wake up and look instead of shouting nonsense. First off, there was a resurrection. It's a simple fact, undeniable as it is. How can all those who witnessed it 2,000 years ago, apparently, according to some but not others, and added hundreds of years later, how can all of those be wrong? Behind your blah blah is nothing but a doubting Thomas. As for Aristotle, that's easy. Once you realize that all this talk about enlightenment will not save your soul from the devil, then you'll see the truth. Dump this philosophy and master nature. Like Aristotle says, mastering nature gives you the power to manipulate her. Knowledge is power. Right? Knowledge is not. We've been studying knowledge and that state of being. Mastering nature gives you power to manipulate her. Torture her to get her secrets out of her. That's what experiments are, simply torture. What you really need to do is to drop your philosophy. Then you'll see you only need a practical approach that is free of all the ambiguity of your philosophy. What's that? That's Aristotle. Practical, material, torturing nature to manipulate people. You don't need anything more once you've got your faith. You need faith because of the failure of understanding. We are all too weak for the task. That's all. You need to just believe in nonsense, crazy shit because we're too stupid. We're just small beans. We're small beans. We can't have understanding and knowledge. That's not for us. We're small beans. Just small beans. But our beans are so small as small beans. The small bean defense. I like the small bean defense because it encapsulates in a brilliant metaphor the essence of every fascist or believer argument against reason, understanding, and justice. Don't criticize me, says Netanyahu. I'm just a small bean. Let me do my genocide. You got to do it, genocide. Right? The MAGAs and the racists, when they get called out, don't cancel me. Don't send me to the concentration camps. Just the brown people. Not me. I'm a small bean. Or I've heard it called cry bullies. Because believers can only break and they're addicted to it as their idea of knowing. Sadism. Belief-based thinking makes you sadistic. People enjoy hating on others, crushing others, genociding others, starving others. That's the disgusting nature of human beings because we have developed reason, so we don't need blind belief from caveman times, which means we have created technology without first, because of the unique conditions of our evolution, you could say, we haven't approached our thinking with rationality while we still have language. In other words, we evolved cognitively without applying that cognitive evolution to ourselves. So we can make nuclear bombs, but we've never reflected on our own way of thinking. We still have caveman, savage, zombie thinking, belief. Not truth. It's just belief. Believing someone. Doing as you're told. Stupid. So they want to be harmed. I've got a right to hit my children. I've got a right to colonize that country. I've got a right to etc., etc. Torture my employees. But if you call me out, don't be mean. I'm just a little small bean. So bully, and then they cry when they get called out. You make me sad when you say that I'm a bully. So I love that. We have a metaphor that summarizes that whole way of thinking. Hypocrisy. I get to be cruel, but don't be cruel to me. Hypocrisy. Good things should happen to people if they're in my cave. But other caves, other tribes, says the savage caveman, they get to die. Be nice to the Jews, but they get to starve the Palestinian children to death. Maybe we should look at this idea of belief, hey? If that's how it functions. We are the chosen people. We get to do all the things, but you don't. Does every religion believe that, in essence? I think they do. So, the small bean. Lovely, lovely metaphor, the small bean defense. You need faith. Because we are small beans, we can't have understanding. We are too weak for the task. So that's the hate. Anti-chorus. Let's see if the anti-chorus owns them. Now is your turn to listen, haters. Is it true that analysis is empty? What? It is true. Ah, right, I get it. It is true that analysis is empty. All you need to know is what it is empty of. Go back again to what has been said. See if this analysis is empty of. What's it empty of? Interpretations. Interpretations that are foreign to the work. Remember how we've been talking about learning to read? Where's my pen? We go through the stages of cognition and evolution as we read, because to get into the book, you have to some degree, drop your pathologos, false beliefs, drop your image of yourself, drop the internal haters, drop the internal chorus, and get curious, being stung. Philosophical ignorance. And then you collect the clues as we carry our question and our ifs. Collect the clues. And then we organize them to answer our questions, ideally in the dialectic. That's that structure. Can you define your idea first? Can you see how it functions? Can you see how that functioning relates to other things? And as a result, can you conclude back about the subject? Now, this process is empty of anything that's not in the text. It's in the text. You shouldn't use a mod when you play Resident Evil to take all of the keys that you discovered in Silent Hill and take them over to try and open the doors in Resident Evil. No, that's from a different game. Your beliefs and interpretations are from somewhere else. We want to read the book. And we were talking about last time how that whole process is reflected too in midwifery. Because as we go through this in our reading, we will not only be collecting things from the text, those interpretations that are not in the text, we can also collect, which are the false opinions about ourselves, give up all of the stuff that reflects the chorus. You're just a small being. You can't have understanding. You can't have enlightenment. You can't fulfill your purpose here in life. You're too weak or too weird looking or whatever it is. You collect all of those words, states of mind, feeling states, write them down, because they can also be organized, not in reading, but in midwifery. Midwifery is the use of this to help people organize their clues to gain freedom from their pathologos, false beliefs about reality and the self. So these two got things here, the self and reality, let's move them over a little bit. So this process, reality, or mind with a capital M, and self, is where we're heading in our reading, but equally so, it's a false image. It's a false image of these two things that underlie our pathologos. Hey, welcome, Reeve. Welcome. How are you feeling today? So, doing the same thing. Collecting the right opinions from our reading, empty of interpretation, empty of this. When we do have interpretations come up, because we're reading so carefully and we've got our friends here, we can collect those also. They're the false opinions. And just as we organize these with the dialectic and understanding to reach knowledge of reality and encounter the self, so too when we arrange them in philosophical midwifery, which also follows the dialectic, same, we discover what we are carrying, our false beliefs. There's that word again, beliefs, that cause of all human problems, our beliefs, which are a shadow of reality and a false belief about the self. It's interesting, isn't it? Just the one game. One goes in the major, using the language of music, the major direction, circle of fifths, and one going in this other direction, the circle of fourths. Interesting. Interesting, because if our hypothesis is correct, then what we are learning here is the highest use of understanding, the highest use of the logos and the structure of reality, the dialectic, which is reflected into all other subjects, including music and geometry and everything else. In other words, can you find the logos of music if you're a musician? Can you find the logos of math if you're a mathematician? Can you find the logos of what it is that is your art that you're into? That's fun. So, empty of interpretations that are foreign to the work. That's what analysis is empty of. So, same thing with dream analysis. When we talk about, hey, yeah, we do dream analysis, it's a lot of fun. It supercharges your development, it supercharges the work of midwifery, and it supercharges the coffee chats that you have with the best friends that you have. People with a open mind who love understanding and a generous heart. When we talk about that, they'll say, what? Oh yeah, I read a book on dream interpretation. We say, no, 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 no. And we do this with our finger. We go, no, 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 like this. Because this means we say it's not dream interpretation, it's dream analysis. Analysis is empty of interpretations. And then we do this. And they go, oh yeah, I read a book and it said that if I dream about a monkey, it means I'm going to get rich. And then we give them one of these. The double finger shakes. No, 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 no. That's interpretation, my friend. And we do analysis. Antichorus continues. See if this analysis is empty of interpretations that are foreign to the work. Oh, and by the way, the idea of empty of interpretations that are foreign also plays out in midwifery. The whole point is, as you go through this, you surface thoughts, feelings, the internal haterades. Write them down word for word. And equally so, when you midwife other people, get your notebook out, or if you've got a blackboard or whiteboard, whiteboard now. Who wants to use chalk? Write it on the board, word for word, because each word is important. In other words, the midwife doesn't impregnate the subject with their own language. You don't interpret them. You use their words as little as you can. Now, you might ask them questions for that so that they can, well, that's the game, right? Asking them questions so they can get their words out and nail down their words accurately. So instead of saying, I wasn't standing, I was sitting, that kind of thing. But it's their words, just like it's their text. See? As above, so below. Isn't it interesting that everything we've been seeing about creation is shadows and reflections? The pathologos is the shadow of knowledge and self that we're after. Midwifery is the reflection of the same process, but in the other direction. And one of our questions that we are carrying today is, what's it feel like? If the whole purpose of us is to move from belief-based cognition to understanding-based cognition, philodainoia, love and logos, what's it feel like? Whoops. How do you feel it? How do you recognize you're in that state? And in the text we said, hey, this is a shadow of something. Because our functioning is through understanding and dialogue and reading is in time. But our state of being is timeless. And by the way, we read last time, you can come to that realization in both reading and midwifery. In reading, once you have an insight by doing this, collecting the right opinions, carrying a question from being stung, collecting the right opinions, organizing it in the dialectic to create a hypothesis, you'll have an insight. in that moment of insight, you recognize there's no self-image there. There's nothing tying you to an existence in the physical world as your identity. You're out of time, baby. Baby. You're out of time, pal. Sweetheart, you're out of time. You're timeless. You are timeless, baby. While your functioning is in time, your existence and state of mind is out of time. And what's curious is that was said to be a shadow of something else. And our hypothesis is, well, what could that be a shadow of? Well, we've only got, if it's two things together, we've only got these two left. In other words, could the state of functioning of understanding, which we've described as a kind of clarity and purity and freedom and openness, which has something in time and something out of, could that be a shadow of this with the functioning in this? So a timeless functioning with something that is not just out of time, but transcends time itself, is our hypothesis. But notice, it's shadows. It's all reflections and shadows into each level of reality, each cognitive function. Here we have the levels of reality. We talked about creation. The artist has to make his creation like himself. That's what creation is. In other words, the self is somehow reflected into reality, and that reality uses itself as a model for our physical world. It's all reflections or shadows. Or, in terms of the pathologos, a distorted shadow. Our belief of reality and self is the cause of our problems. Belief, not understanding. That's the difference. Oh, and by the way, you can have that same realization of your state of being outside of time and functioning in time in midwifery when you realize that, hey, the removal of these false beliefs about self, these false images of self, these masks we wear, are not being replaced with new masks. It's not positive thinking. It's letting go of what's false. They lose their power. In fact, in some of the dialogues, Socrates talks about them in Hades, as shadows in Hades, just playing themselves out and then dissipating. That's it. Shadows, playing themselves out and dissipating, caused by a shadow, a distorted shadow of these two things, that you can free yourself from in a reflection of reading. Right opinions but false opinions. Dialectic, same. Shadows, reflections. And we said, hey, vice, therefore, is the shadow or reflection or distorted reflection of virtue. Reflections, shadows, all the way through. Of what? Of self. Self-reflecting true reality in all possible ways. Isn't that neat? I think it's neat. I think it's really neat. I think it's super neat. Oh, I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool. Oh, we have something in the chat. Let me catch up. By the way, there is a question I thought I would ask you. We like questions. To carry a question is to be on a quest. Why in Plato's writing, some words start with a capital letter? Ooh, that's good. Well, usually they're to indicate there is a meaning different from English. For example, the Greek word for this, The 4 cognitive functions: curiousness or stung, right opinion, understanding. When we say understanding, look, capital U, because we're not talking about understanding the way we use it in our everyday modern world. We're not understanding how many beans there are in China. We're understanding how to manipulate the markets to get the profits, baby. So it usually indicates it has a higher, a fancy word for higher is anagogic. Impress your friends. Anagogic, upward moving. That's a fancy word. And if you say it loudly at the coffee shop, everyone else drinking coffee will clap. And I say, oh, that Reeve guy's really smart. Says anagogic. I don't even know what anagogic means. He must be pretty smart. So yeah, it means that it has so we use the word dianoia as well. See? Understanding with a capital U or dianoia. Same thing with knowledge. Knowledge isn't knowing how to ride your bike. That's because that's the physical world. It's nous, which is mind, not a mind, but the mind knowing itself as eternity or that which is timeless. It's the knowing experience. So one of the quotes from Socrates that you might see on Facebook from your grandma is, "I'm just as wise as Socrates, because he said he was the wisest man in Athens because he knew that he knew nothing. See? There is no knowledge." Bollocks. That's not what he said. That's a misquote. He said he's smarter than these other jabronis because he knows what knowledge is, so he's not going to mistake things that they say they know for what he knows. Because a lot of jabronis in the world say, oh, I know things, but they're talking about the physical world. You can't. You can't know things through physical world, through physical perception. You can gather opinions. You can form beliefs that cause all human problems. Or the highest use of our senses is to read these sorts of books so we can collect the right opinions that we can then arrange into understanding with a capital U, dianoia, which prepares our mind for the experience of knowledge, or nous, capital K. And another idea is, hey, that experience of being, you can intellectually recognize. So in the experience, it might be difficult to recognize the aspects because it's an all-at-oneness, but you can use understanding to reflect on that experience of nous, capital K knowledge, and that's where you get the eidos. All of its aspects. They're not different, they're not separate and distinct. Just like the laws of reality, gravity isn't different from electromagnetism. In other words, you feel it all at once, but you can break it up and realize there are different. Is beauty different than harmony? Yes, but no. Aspects. So these aspects, we don't, in the Greek it's eidos, but the English translation is idea. But we think of ideas as concepts, abstractions, less real. But these are more real. It's reality. So we give it a capital I-D-E-A, capital idea, capital I. So that's another example of a capitalized letter. Points to a special meaning that we don't have in our colloquial English. But I think it's better to actually use the word dianoia, actually use the word nous, and especially the word ousia, because ousia doesn't just mean self-reflection. It applies to self-reflection. We are reflecting on ourselves in this process of collecting right opinions and understanding, and in its reflection in midwifery. But ousia levels up and becomes nous. As being doesn't have a physical existence. Its existence is because it's self-contained. And we saw that as we read. It's self-contained and self-consistent and what was it? Scroll. Self-constituted. It reverts upon itself in the activity of understanding, which reflects pure being, and it's self-constituted. Its mode of being, its power, and its activity are all within itself, and it stands independent of everything else, so it's self-constituted. That's ousia. Its lifeness and its separateness or individuality is because it's self-contained. That's ousia. So ousia is one of those ones where there isn't actually an English word for it. So we actually have to use the word ousia. But things like dianoia, we have a similar one based on the teachings of Aristotle, which is wrong and is about the physical world. So we give it a capital. Yeah, good question. I think that I understood that it kind of meant in aspects of the eidos like beauty. Oh, there you go. You're smarter than me. Is it right? Why not just write it in minuscule context and we could speak about beauty in general? No need for capital letter. I guess you could. I guess so. One of the eidos is beauty itself, which has its own ousia or self-existence. But we can say beauty with a lowercase b when we talk about not it as a noun or a selfhood, or so in the Greek they say self beauty, altos for to say this. One of the three meanings of self. But we could say with a lowercase letter when we mean it as an adjective, a beautiful painting, a beautiful streamer. A beautiful sunset. So that could be a way of distinguishing it. Now, I think it's better to push it a little bit and actually start using the word self. Because I think that has an effect on your consciousness when you use the word self in your language. Good question. Oh, and then you saw the example of knowledge before I did. Good stuff. Okay, so that's a way to say the proper idea could only be expressed in Greek, but for common understanding, the author uses the closest English word. Yeah, that's the trick. That's one of the questions that we're carrying, right? One of the questions we're carrying. Number one, how do we do dream analysis? What's its language? How exactly does beauty, lowercase b, have its beauty because it somehow participates in capital letter B? How exactly does that work? Socrates hasn't talked about it yet, so it's a question. What's the state of mind of being in this understanding we're after? And if it's a shadow of something higher, what's the state of the oneself? And finally, why is it difficult to share this? And one of the difficulties is we want to share it. We want to make these Balboa translations where you can actually read the words of Socrates and not Aristotle, and all of the interpreters that we get from college available to everyone. And not everyone is familiar with ousia, or nous, or dianoia. Not everyone knows a smattering of ancient Greek like we do because we're awesome. So, you kind of want to use similar English words. So we're going to use knowledge, but we'll give it a capital N. But and one Balboa even puts it in purple. But that's the idea. How do we stay true to the text, but also make it accessible? My idea is using crazy sound drops.
I'm too pure.
And
Is this chat full of dumb cunts?
But maybe you have some other ideas of how to make this fun and accessible for everyone. But yeah, good question. Yeah, the closest English word is not fully satisfying for comprehension. Yep, you got it. Oh, welcome. Now, do you prefer GoldenEye now, or Sus, or is there a name that you prefer? Seeing as you got two handles. Dancing Raichu, Excited EV. Oh, and we have Squirtle playing the sax. And we have Snorlax dabbing. And Magikarp and Squirtle on drugs. Pikachu twerking. I'm a beautiful streamer. Oh, thanks. You're a perceptive chatter. Nah, I don't like that joke. I take that back. It's really enlightening. This question has been bugging me for a few years. Oh. So now, that's the thing. This is another thing. Walking the line between keeping the real Greek but sharing it in English. Another walking the line is, how do we reflect together, but I don't want to destroy your questions. Hopefully in reflecting together, because you put it together yourself as well, hopefully you've given birth to another question. Like a deeper question. Like maybe this one. Considering the difficulty between sharing it in English but staying true to the text. How do I talk to my friends about it? Don't worry, I have many, many questions left. Well, hopefully this question upgraded to one. Can you find an upgrade to this question so I don't feel bad about ruining your question? How do I talk to my friends about it? Because you can't use a capital letter in conversation. I don't know, hopefully a new question will come to birth from this one. I have to take a piss. Be right back. Oh, I shouldn't have recorded. All right, let's go. Welcome back, me. Oh, anti-chorus. Hey, haters, time to listen. It's true that analysis is empty. What you need to know is what it is empty of. Go back again and see what's been said. See if this analysis is empty of interpretation that are foreign to the work. Hey, welcome, Simon. Thinking about studying philosophy, and I'm wondering what jobs a degree would get me. Oh my goodness. I can't answer that for you, my friend. If you find out, then let me know. True philosophy that we do here and isn't paid well. I play music. So it's more about discovering the nature of yourself and the highest reach of your mind, transcending the physical world, but also learning how to move from belief-based thinking into understanding, so you can also understand the root cause of any of the blocks or problems that come up for you, repeating cycles of problems or negative self-talk or negative states of mind. So it's more about finding out where you were before you were alive, where you're going after you die, and what you should be doing while you're here, rather than making money. But yeah, I can't help you with that one. Let me know if you find a way. I like having tools of understanding, I think, is discourse. Yes. So what we're doing as we're reading, because Socrates is someone who has gone through that process we were telling Simon about, someone who has done what we are here to do, master understanding, discover the nature of self and reality, and therefore escape the cycle of physical reincarnation. We want to see how he thinks. Is there a structure behind his thinking too? Sometimes having an answer is really nice. It gives room to reflect on other questions. I like it. I think that it brings an answer and not a question, because it's a human choice to have been made for a specific reason. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. It's more of a translation question than anything, so that's fair. Beyond that, if you insist, we can develop questions like, why Greek words such as dianoia have been left behind by the evolution of language? Or was ancient Greek closer to the truth of the world, or certain truths? Yes, I like that. I've been wondering about that too. What would happen if we picked up the language of ancient Greek? There are certain words that are not in our language anymore. And there are certain words you need to do philosophy. Russians can't do philosophy. Because what we are learning about is not a beautiful thing or discovering a mind, but we want to find the beautiful, the mind. If your language doesn't have a word for the, you simply can't think with that in that way. In other words, Russians have to borrow a word from another language, otherwise they can't do philosophy. That's why they celebrate their fictional or their non-fiction authors. Wait, fiction. Like Dostoevsky and stuff like that. They're not philosophers, they're authors. Poets, we would call them poets. But if there are other words that we don't have a word for in our English language, but we need to do this job, then we need to borrow them. And one key one is the word self, because self, the word altos is inherent, has those three levels. Like we've been talking about recognizing reality. See, one of the questions you've raised is, how come we've lost these words? And one of the answers is, well, we killed Socrates. We dropped the ball when we murdered the best person sent from the gods to help us. Because we murdered Socrates before he taught his student Plato midwifery. And without midwifery, Plato wasn't able to midwife Aristotle from his problem. So therefore, Aristotle was not able to leave the world of becoming and enter the world of being. And that's what philosophy is. Philosophy is the study of beauty, justice, reality, mind. And of course, that's just half of the game. The next game is to find its cause, the self. So the language that we have is Latin. From the mistranslation of Socrates through Aristotle. Just as modern Christians do not follow Jesus, they follow Paul, who completely rejected everything Jesus said and made up his own horseshit. But the thing about certain keywords like the word altos, which means self, inherent is all three dimensions of reality. Because you can say self in terms of it. Like let's say you're talking about an apple. And in the middle of the sentence, if we already know you're talking about a specific apple, you say, oh, pass self to me. But the way self is used in a different way, like in the Iliad, Achilles' shield was supposed to have some immortal divine powers. It was the greatest of all shields. Capital S, self, in English. In other words, it somehow reflected eternity. It had the excellence of shieldness. And of course, self-beauty up here. But when we use the word the one self or good self, it's still the word self. Just as for there to be many beautiful things, there has to be first, more primary as its cause, beauty. So it has to be beauty itself for there to be beautiful selves. Well, if all of the things up here, self-beauty, self-justice, self-excellence, if they are all selves, if there are many capital S selves, there must be, on a higher level, self itself. So you see how the word altos or self could apply to all three. Now the thing about Plato and Socrates, in their conversations, he uses the word altos or self to point to all three. Meaning, if you come across the word self in a Platonic dialogue, most people will read it as itself. And every single translation we've got of Socrates up until now have only translated it as the lower of the three. But if you know this, you know he's giving you a puzzle. Like at the end of Inception where the top's spinning, or the end of Fight Club and you realize that Tyler Durden wasn't real. You got to go through it again and read it on a different level. Now that you got the twist. So now go through and read that passage or the whole book again of Plato. But every time you see the word self, don't say itself, say this self, being. And then read it again with this in mind. In other words, you can do the 3 stages of learning: philomathesis, loving of learning; philosophy, which applies to being, love of wisdom; and philophronesis, that applies to here. These are the 3 terms Socrates gives in human development. You start by loving learning, and then you realize for beautiful things you need beauty itself. Now you're into philosophy. Or for there to be many minds, you need the mind. From A to the, that Russians can't do. They can't get into philosophy unless they pick up the word the from somewhere. But then when you're in studying the mind, you realize there are many excellences or eidos or self-beauty or selfers. We call them selfers. Here we go, selfers. Well, for there to be many selfers, there has to be the self. What's the self? Therefore, as the self is the highest term, higher than the Creator God. Because the God needs selfers, he needs vitality, he needs power to create. As a oneness. Well, if there's a oneness of qualities, you first need one. On a higher, more transcendent plane of existence. That transcends even existence. If you define existence by this, which we normally do. So you're absolutely right. We need to pick up either ancient Greek language, because you see through your understanding, you see through your language. Or we have to introduce these terms back into our lexicon, I think. All right, thanks. God bless, says Simon. Well, what do you mean by God? In the text, we've been talking about God being something that you can use to justify belief. But if belief is the cause of our problems, What if we replaced the word God with self? Do you have to believe you have a self? So if problems are caused by beliefs, keeping us in pathologos ignorance, and beliefs are a shadow of self in reality, distorted one, beliefs. Oops. Do you ever have to believe that you are a self? It's the most immediate and intimate and direct thing that there is. It's the last thing you could possibly ever believe. Therefore, by not talking about the highest term being God, but self, you've short-circuited that problem of belief. You can understand the self. You can experience its manifestation as pure mind. And in the text we saw, hey, while you can experience the mind, you can encounter, because it transcends even experience as the cause of experience. You can understand the self, you can encounter the self. And also what we've discovered is there is a state of self. So we're wondering, what the heck is the state of being self? And we're carrying words open, free, pure, and clear as we wonder. So, self-blessed to you, Simon. But yes, having a proper answer to a methodical question is something that helps further the reflection. I don't think a question must always bring another question. An answer can also be an engine or a cog to reflection. I get that. That makes sense. Well said. And Phantom, best streamers on streabu.com. Replace the space, and then there's a bunch of gibberish. I don't see how that relates to the text. I do want the best viewers. I think I've got the best viewers. How many viewers have asked a question like the one above what you just wrote? Reflecting on the nature of questions themselves, and how some might be practical, leading to further reflection, whereas some might be of being or self, and can only be answered in an experience of this, or an encounter of this, or maybe a state of both, or at least giving birth to a deeper question that might facilitate that. Phantom, how many questions have you seen like that? I think we already have the best viewers. That's what I think. And also, I think you're spam, so I will ban you. So, haters. The analysis is empty, but it's empty of interpretations. My lighting gets weird when the sun comes up. Empty of interpretations that are foreign to the work. Bring back the chorus. It is as painful to realize that you have been persuaded to believe what is manifestly false as it is to realize you have undergone suffering because of that. But because you created the belief, again, you were persuaded and the conditions were set up, but still, it was a conclusion you made. It is painful to realize that you have undergone suffering of your own making. Persuaded to believe what is false, manifestly false, and therefore have undergone a suffering of your own making. Now, instead of being loyal to your beliefs, haterators, wake up from your folly, put aside these deniers of truth, Aristotle and Paul, and instead seek your freedom in the truth. There we have that idea of freedom that you discover, not believe someone else, for yourself, about yourself. Bringing back that idea of recursion. Earlier we were saying that mind itself, or ousia, is self-contained and recursive because the activity of mind is understanding, which uses those eidos. We understand, we're focused on beauty. We want to understand beauty. We want to understand causes. We want to understand justice. And the way we do it uses those eidos, whole and part, same and different. They have an existence. They're not in some filing cabinet in the sky. They are also part of ousia. So we're using ousia, reflecting back upon ousia, and in that activity we require the intellect to be put in play. So we're using mind or ousia, focused on ousia, in ousia, therefore it's self-recursive or self-contained, self-constituted, and since it reverts upon itself in its activity, it's recursive in respect to its existence, self-constituted within itself and independent of everything. So doesn't matter if you have a beautiful painting and you scribble all over it and you make it less beautiful, it doesn't affect beauty itself. Thank goodness. Beauty itself stands apart. So all of these dictators that we allow power, they destroy beautiful things and they try and create a justification for their own injustice by removing just things. All of the thinkers, all of the progressive people are being rounded up by ICE and by Donald Trump, thinking if they can destroy real justice, then that will eliminate justice itself. Sorry, pal. Its existence, its power, its being, its activity are within itself and independent of everything else. So that allowed us to understand being, this middle part. Remember our Socrates said, I can give you a definition of philosophy in one ratio? Or one analogy? The sun, the highest aspect of the physical world, is to the brilliant light of being as this is to the good itself. Which means as we learn about this, like self-constituted, and its shadow understanding is about this, using its parts and making use of intelligence. Whenever we are learning about this, our author is telling us, unlock the twist. In other words, everything you've learned about the difference between self-constituted outside of time, whereas the physical world requires the sun, requires nourishing, and is in time. Apply that same relationship here as well. That's the twist. That's the puzzle. So if the highest functioning in our physical world is understanding, the dialectic, in time, but if you're doing that, you will recognize that there's no image of the self there. It's not an effort thing. It's not a doing thing. It's not a mask thing or attention thing. Therefore, your state of existence is timeless. If this is out of time and this is in time, what would happen if you leveled that up? if in time is the lesser and out of time is the greater, what would it be if we then made out of time lesser than something else? Now, eternity out of time is much, much greater than something in the physical world. It goes through all its ups and downs and decays and dies and grows and all sorts of crazy shit happens. But eternal, self-constituted, reflecting reality itself, that's much greater, right? Now imagine that's the lesser version of something similarly greater than that. That's the analogy. That's the power of analogy. So these two dots, like a what's an example? How about a shepherd is to a doctor is to a king? Does that work? A shepherd looks after sheep's bodies, a doctor looks after human bodies, but a king is supposed to look after human souls? You know, how about a shepherd is to a doctor is to a guru? In other words, there's a jump from here to here, but that jump is reflected here as well. That's why the double dots. So it's terms vary, relations stay the same. That's the significance of analogy. So as a shepherd relates to his sheep's health and well-being and stuff, so too a doctor relates to physical bodies. You could create a list of terms, but then you take that same jump to look at a guru. Maybe that's a bad example. What's a mean analogy that reflects three different upgrades? A kindergarten teacher is to a year 1 teacher is to a year 7 teacher. I don't know. Well, that's the idea. The difference between this world and this world, if we discover something, then find what would it be if now this is the lesser and you applied it that way. In other words, if the cognitive state of understanding that we are practicing has a functioning in time and a state of being out of time, but the text said it's a shadow of something else. If your functioning is out of time, what would your higher existence be? In other words, what's even better than eternity? The same way eternity is way better than physical in time. Because whatever that is, that's that much as awesome. That's what we're after. That's the state of the self we're ultimately after, of which understanding is its shadow, is our hypothesis. How cool is that? And we have a clue about this in the text, because right after the author gave us a description of being self-constituted here and self-referring here and within itself here, he gives us this. Seek your freedom in the truths you discover about yourself. Don't be afraid to look at yourself. You discover about yourself in you looking yourself. Self, self, self. Mind, mind, mind. So long as we can overcome our fear. So, in this task, we have internal haters, the chorus, that says, don't do that, there is no understanding, there are some things you just gotta believe. Well, he's hang on a second, that's a fear. It's a fear based on a persuasion about to believe what is false. And because we concluded we were our self-cause, which means we have the power to unzombify ourselves. And all of our suffering, therefore, is our own making. So we were persuaded to believe. And beliefs are false. And we were persuaded to believe something manifestly false, causing our suffering. But if we overcome that fear that underlines this false belief, fear of the mind, we can seek the truth of self, ourselves, by looking at self. The same way, understanding in these conversations uses the mind through the functioning of the mind, the aspects of the mind, to know the aspects or eidos of mind, employing mind to do so. Mind minding mind. So too, if we overcome our fear or our pathologos, we can self. And if we do that, in the same way, this stands apart in a transcendent way from the physical world, the self stands apart in a transcendent way from that. Neat. Put aside these deniers of truth, Aristotle and Paul, and wake up from your folly. Put aside these deniers of truth and seek your freedom in the truths you discover about yourself. Hooray. That's where we are. My lighting doesn't look very good. That's a bit better. Woof. How about that? No. This one. Keep reading. Socrates. You mentioned that some of the Gospels were unearthed in Egypt. Did any continue your work? If so, they are likely to fit into one of our divisions. What divisions? The divisions of ways that human beings can respond to truth. So far, we've got Paul, the wolf in sheep's clothing, the denier. We've got Mark, the denier of the deniers. And maybe in these newly unearthed texts, we can find other responses to Jesus' teachings. Yes, many works were recovered. Many of them follow the way of knowledge as a way to salvation. They share a view of God that sets the conditions for their system. In the Gospel of Thomas and the Secret Book of Thomas, and even Judas, were among many of the major works recovered. If there were once many texts, shall I assume that they were tossed into the flames? Book burning has a long history, doesn't it? When were the chosen ones selected? Book burning? I thought that was just a thing that MAGA likes to do. No, it's a human, savage, caveman response to belief-based thinking that is inherently false and a fear of the mind and rationality. The modern Trumpers and MAGA are no different than the caveman savages or these jerks that burnt all these Gospels of Jesus 2,000 years ago. Same old shit. Fear of the mind and rationality can only break and not make. Belief versus understanding. Worth repeating. When were the ones chosen? It was 300 years ago, says Jesus. It was 300 years after my departing, after Jesus died, that the church selected the popular works of the New Testament. The rest were destroyed, or so it was thought. They chose only those that could support their drive to dominate and control the people within a church system. Ooh. Since the Gnostic works stress the way to knowledge, so we've got a word for these new texts, or escaped the burning from these savages, stress the way to knowledge, there is no need for faith. As the Gnostic works, outlining the teachings of Jesus, stress the way of knowledge, there is no need for faith as the road to salvation, nor a need for the church. I can't help thinking about these kids that I always run into when I'm out playing music. So sad. They're told that they can only be happy if they have faith, believe in bullshit. Makes me sad. Poor kids. Some 50 Gnostic works have been recovered, and among them, 5 are considered the most significant. Okay. 50 unearthed text, 5 are the most significant. What kinship do they have? I do wonder what made them special, and if these works fit into one another of our divisions. These are the works that cite me as being present as the speaker, and the others mentioned are among my circle of apostles. I am shown to be continuing my work with Matthew as my recorder, teaching to a select audience. They draw from my analogies, allegories, parables, metaphors, and they add their special differences. In the book of Thomas, it is said to be the one most akin to me. Great. This is the one recognized as the most true to what Jesus was talking about. Thomas lays emphasis upon divine luminosity as being inherent within all. Oh, so we were talking about. And that was the root of my sadness about these kids that I see who are manipulated by these ignorant, harmful adults to say, you need to have faith. Well, what if divine luminosity is within all? Then you are killing their development, you fuckers. Divine luminosity or knowledge is inherent within all, as the ideal of my teachings. And the practice to follow. Practice. In his repeating the theme of the Delphic oracles, know thyself. Interesting. And linking it with divine luminosity, he brings us together. Without that most splendid theme, know thyself. Okay, that's enough, kids. Enough. He brings up, without that most splendid theme, there would be no philosophy. Without know the self, there would be no philosophy. He presents me filled with that light that is the light from the Father. He calls those enlightened who are filled with that light. You are enlightened. Makes sense, right? We've been talking about this as the penultimate enlightenment experience, but one of its qualities is, well, its descriptions is the pure light of being. So if it's enlightenment, you're filled with the light of being. Interesting. And insights along the way are many enlightenments. That's why, when a comic book character has an insight, a light bulb is above his head, like this. And he says, Eureka! Those are enlightened who are filled with that light, since it is the light within themselves. These are the ones that are said to have gained the saving knowledge that marks them as Gnostic thinkers. So this is what makes you Gnostic. The idea of the kingdom of God in Mark is to be experienced here and now. So we have heard already in Mark talking about this state of mind called the kingdom of God by him. Clearly there is a difference, since there is no mention of the arrest, trial, crucifixion, and resurrection. Interesting. I am going to turn on my fan. I'll be right back. Here we go. No mention of the arrest, trial, crucifixion, and resurrection. Socrates. That is a very important philosophical addition to the gospel, Jesus. Since Thomas is linking Plato to your teaching. However, there is no room for dreams here, is there? He is conscious of continuing your work just as Plato did with me. He looks like a category 4 to me. What do you think? Category 4? I think 1 is accepting the new truth and dropping your old beliefs, the best one. 2 is just denying what's new to stay loyal to the old. 3 is pretending to speak for the new, a wolf in sheep's clothing, while actually presenting the old, like Paul and Aristotle. And 4 is patchwork, like the Kabbalah. Take a little bit of the new and take it as a patch to the old. Patch up the old cloak. I think that's what category 4 is. Yes, says Jesus. He does that very thing. The additional strength is that he was my twin, and there is much we share. So, did you know that Thomas is Jesus' twin brother? I wasn't told that at school. They both go beyond the 4 Gospels and Paul. Thomas who's the twin? Thomas. Twin Thomas. Twin. Oh. Twin Thomas. Thomas advances a synthesis or unity of both our traditions. He must be a new member of our class. Now what of James? So we've got the 2, accept the new, reject the new, 1 and 2. Wolf in sheep's clothing, patchwork, and now a unity. That sounds like patchwork, isn't it? Or maybe unifying both is an extra class. Let's keep reading. What of James? He is the other extreme, of course, from the Book of Thomas and the Gospel of Thomas. Oh, got a Book of Thomas and we've got a Gospel of Thomas. The sharp contrasts they include are the apocalyptic themes, which are repeated in those other Gospels. The secret book of James repeats the passion themes and presents itself as filling in the teachings that were absent during my ministry. The teachings given to James and Peter is called the Revelation of James. The new teaching brings to light the theme of enlightenment, for he says to be saved one needs to know thyself. Importantly, the Gnostic John introduces fundamental Hellenic philosophy terms into his work. He uses them for his explanations into the divine luminosity. In doing so, links his work to the Hellenic spiritual tradition. So it is that he retains the core beliefs and continues Thomas's synthesis of our traditions. He keeps both, and that makes him a member of a new class. Wow, there's a lot going on here. But it's the same bullshit. I mean, it's the same idea. We have beliefs and we have understanding. That's it. Simple as that. We can apprehend the world based on beliefs that we get from other people when we were kids and stupid wee babies. Don't know anything. Everything in our mouths. Grabbing the cat by the face. Trying to eat the cat. Don't eat the cat. Beliefs. Savage. Can only break. From caveman days. Zombies. Limited reflection. Limited words. Brains. And we have understanding. Everything seems to be a continuum between these. Complete acceptance, like us, the good people. Oh look, fireworks. That's cool. And complete rejection. The most savage people. The most ignorant people. The biggest breakers. Now, pretend to be it. Wolf in sheep's clothing, Aristotle and Paul. Take a piece as a patch to your cloak, the Kabbalah. Now maybe there's a middle ground where someone wants to synthesize the two. Thomas the twin. So how do we remember? Thomas the twin tank engine. That's how I remember. So he wants to synthesize the two. Oh, I love my beliefs. So I'll synthesize them. And it seems like John is doing the same. John introduces fundamental Hellenic philosophy terms to explain the nature of the divine luminosity. Of course, you have to. Because it's Hellenic, but it's just philosophy. It's just understanding consciousness. But it seems like these two jabronis like their apocalyptic bullshit. The world is going to end. Big scary. So maybe that's this new class, halfway between both. Let's keep reading. I can agree with that. A new class, I can agree. We are adding members to our class, and that is a good sign. We are still making progress with our task. Clearly, the necessity of knowing thyself is the most fundamental of ideas in our traditions. So that's something in which they are the same, except for Paul, who's just a complete moron. Knowing thyself is key to all of these other people. The Gnostics. It is the true mark of the true Hellenic logos. Oi, the word logos. Let's highlight that. All my philosophy mirrors that idea. Know thyself. So, we had old mate come in today, Simon, I hope he's still around, saying, how can I make money? And we say, no. No. Philosophy isn't about manipulating people in order to make a profit. It's about knowing the self. Thyself. This one? Is that thyself? Nope. Thyself points to this one here. So that when Parmenides says, I'm going to speak about myself, thyself, he gives the first hypothesis. So we want to know this guy. The cause even of that divine luminosity. But it's also, we can recognize that we are knowing ourselves as an experience in divine luminosity. That's part of it. But remember, there is a fundamental analogy. This to that. Let's keep reading. All my philosophy mirrors that idea, and when it is ignored, what remains of it is a hollow, empty system. If you don't have know thyself as your core tenet, you have a hollow, empty system. Surely you agree that all the mysteries of our systems spin around the idea of the self.
But this is probably
Disgusting. You've been a bad little girl. You're fantastic.
Well, you're doing your best. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Sag.
What you say is true, says Jesus, and needs to be said. In addition, we can say that amongst the Gnostic works, John's work opens with his account of his divine luminosity. Hey! And his work includes an account of what can be learnt from it. So John's Gnostic works opens with his own account of his divine luminosity, and so he tries to make sense of it. Remember the Mark story of Jesus that the other Gospels copied? He didn't learn from it. He used it as a justification of his false beliefs. The ideas the Gnostic John brings, the ideas he brings into a unity includes ideas like thought, afterthought, fate, perfect knowledge, mind, and the personification of wisdom as Christ. The crisis man faces for John is his forgetfulness and passions. This is similar indeed to Plato, for he thought forgetfulness is overcome with a knowledge anchored in the divine luminosity. Through its recovery in awakening, hey, that's the name of the channel. Just like in the movie John Wick, when he goes, "It's time for John Wick," and the crowd goes, "Wow." So too, when we read the name of the channel, we also say, "Wow, wow." And then we say,
Talking about a bunch of slop.
maybe.
The more holes, the better.
All right. Awakening. We recover knowledge anchored in divine luminosity, and through its awakening and recalling one's inner vision. All right. How this was practiced, we do not know. Oh, okay. There is no lack of philosophical themes, but there is a need for supporting literature to support the themes. He does not add any reference or practice to your kind of dream study. So we see the text again emphasizing the significance of dream study. Again, we find John's account does not mention anything at all of the passion material, nor any reference to the resurrection story of the 3 New Testament Gospels. Interesting. Right, and so we see this in Plato. Because we killed Socrates before Plato learned midwifery, he had a lot of understanding about knowledge or divine luminosity, but he didn't include anything about midwifery, the specific way of overcoming our problems by addressing belief. And it sounds like John is similar. Although John doesn't give any practice. So no practice of recalling knowledge. Although we do have this theme in the Phaedo that the fact that we recognize beautiful things, we recognize just things, means that we have experienced being before we became human, and learning is a kind of remembering. But it looks like John doesn't have any exercise or method. Okay. But he also doesn't get into the passion, which is the torture and crucifixion of Jesus, and no resurrection, which was added hundreds of years later. Socrates. You end by seeing the link with the Hellenic tradition. However, what you present as an answer, we use as a departure point for understanding. Perhaps this is fundamental. To understand something, you need the necessary connecting ideas to explain it. Let's remember that. To understand something, you need the necessary connecting ideas to explain it. Or if one lacks those, the terms may live on as slogans, without the understanding to comprehend its depth. We're talking today about slogans. Socrates is wisest because he says he knows nothing. It's a slogan that you see on Facebook from people who want to justify not learning anything. And without the understanding of what we're developing here, like this, the levels of reality, the fancy way of that to impress your friends at the coffee shop, ontology, because ontology just means study, but ontology, ontos is the Greek word for being. Ontos, because you have to stand on your tippy toes to get there. Ontos. Ontology is what exists. Being is existence. So this realm of being is what exists, timeless. So if you are studying what exists, you are studying ontology. So these are the dimensions that exist, levels of existence. How you apprehend them, how you think about them, how you perceive them is epistemology, because pistis is another name for knowledge. So how you know, epistis. Because you can remember that because epist. If you don't know something, you're pissed, and you write an angry email. Email, pissed. Epistis. Epistemology. I don't know. Maybe you can think of a better mnemonic device. So those are the two fundamental things that you hear about in colleges. Ontology and epistemology. But here it is. It's just this line here. This line is save yourself. So if our friend in Simon Thinks comes back, we can say save yourself the money you spend on college studying epistemology and just master this. And if you do a philosophy course on ontology, save yourself the time and money and master this. Ontos and epistemos. Ontology and epistemology. With this understanding, we can, by understanding the terms within these two models, we can see the depth. Otherwise, it's a slogan. So Socrates saying, I know nothing because there's no knowledge, is a slogan you see on Facebook, but it's rejecting this. And we can say it's just to justify your ignorance. Or we can more fully say what he says, what Socrates said, not as a slogan, but through understanding by saying, I am wiser than these other jabronis in Athens because I don't mistake knowledge which is here in being for what these jabronis say that they know, because they say they know physical things. And you can't, because they haven't learned this line of epistemology and they don't know these levels of ontology. Now, say that in the comment section under your Nan's Facebook post next time you see it. So listen here, Granny, and say this. So that's an example that we've already been talking about today of without understanding the key terms and how they link together, you're left with empty slogans. Socrates said he knew nothing, so I'm as smart as Socrates. You dork. Now give me your lunch money. Without these key terms, there is no way one can achieve an understanding of these kinds of teachings and their experiences. These terms are Platonic and common to the Hellenic world, but they do not appear present in the Abrahamic traditions. So it seems like they lack understanding. They lack the key terms or the logos, which is what we were talking about in chat earlier. How significant are these key words? Jesus. Surely you know we have a different origin to our beliefs. We come from the seed of Abrahamic tradition, not that of the Hellenes. What do you include in this idea of Abrahamic traditions? The Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Are religions that require faith or belief as the fundamental commitment. Each have a set of holy texts that reveal the nature of God, creation, man's role in it and his true destiny. Nature of God, number 1. By the way, revealed from texts. Do as you are told. They reveal the nature of God, creation, man's role in creation, and our true destiny. These traditions are strangers to your kind of thinking, Socrates. This, of course, accounts for the Gnostic Book of John being more accessible and favored among those attracted to the use of reason as a guide in their spiritual quest. You got a friend who's a hardcore mega Christian, and you're trying to help his soul by encouraging the movement from belief to understanding. Say, oh, by the way, there's a secret Gnostic Book of John. You might find that as a doorway to reason, as a guide for your spiritual quest. I am interested in this work, but right now it confirms that the Book of John and the Gospel of Thomas support Mark's rejection of Paul. Hooray. So, modern Christians believe Paul because they're told to, because that's what belief is. That's why it causes problems and breaks things. The Book of John, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mark, all reject the fundamental principles of what we are told is modern Christianity. How interesting. Yes, and during that early period when both Mark and the Book of Thomas were being circulated, it was possible to accept Thomas and be a follower of mine while ignoring the story of the passion, trial, crucifixion, and resurrection. Do you want to be a more accurate follower of Jesus? Ignore the passion, trial, crucifixion, resurrection. Like when the people at the time were circulating Mark and Thomas's books. And get into understanding. Recall that I said that Thomas calls himself my twin. But by that he announces a priority above all others. For since he was appointed to my inner circle, and not being my brother, he should have known my end. Sorry, he was his brother, okay. Appointed to my inner circle, and being my brother, he should have known my end, should he not? In linking the luminosity to knowing the self and to wisdom, he looks much like he is more akin to you. Than to me, or our differences narrow. However, he assigns the fundamental cause of our ignorance in indulging in sexuality. Here we go. Now, we're starting to notice a theme. Without an understanding of midwifery, what do these people use as a explanation of why man has problems and why it's difficult for most people to experience your own luminosity of your own mind, knowing itself in knowledge, and then understanding it, which is your own capability of thinking for yourself and not believing some other jabroni, and therefore gaining wisdom. What prevents us? What keeps us savages and ignorance and zombies? Well, we understand it as fundamental false beliefs that are a shadow imitation of self and reality that we believed when we were young, and we walk away with an unsuspected false belief we made about ourselves and our role in our family that causes all our goddamn problems. that we are fiercely loyal to, because that fierce, stupid fucking loyalty to false beliefs is what kept these human beings alive before we had reason. We didn't leave the cave and get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Now it served its purpose, we can think, time to let it go. But without that, we have Plato saying the man's problems is caused by forgetfulness. We have John. The crisis man faces for John is forgetfulness and passions. And now for Thomas, he thinks men's problems caused by sexuality. Interesting. Sounds like something we know as a little bit of projection. Their own pathologos difficulties expressed in these different ways, not reflecting on them to see their origin, but to project them onto everyone and say that's the cause of everyone's problems. Is family teaching about sexuality. John's teachings about forgetfulness and passion. Plato just saying forgetfulness. Maybe we shouldn't have murdered Socrates, so we could have learnt actual midwifery and passed it on. Something to think about. Let's make sure that we don't do the same thing again to the next one that emerges from our ranks to help all of us. So, he assigns the fundamental cause, who? Thomas. Twin Thomas, the tank engine, as the cause of our ignorance as indulging in sexuality. We say to that,
Disgusting. I'm so disgusted.
Okay. Yes, he can find the divine hidden or absent in significant acts of mankind. I fathered my last son when I was about 70, having already had several sons. Shall I say something else is needed to explain man's ignorance? Now, we have been talking about already the symposium and the fact that our development is love and logos. It's not a solo quest. We're attracted to beauty. With the development of understanding, we can have actually meaningful and positive relationships. And as we continue with a shared focus on a goal that both people are seeking, know thyself, that intimate relationship can develop through the different levels of connection and unification with different levels of transcendence of beauty, developed through logos and understanding. Dream analysis every morning over breakfast, culminating in the experience of beauty itself, from which you can go on to develop true excellence, which we can say is maybe moving to the self, discovering the state of yourself being your true self, the true self, which might reflect a clarity, purity, openness, and freedom. And in the book it says being as immortal and a friend to the gods as any man could be, and woman. So, and also midwifery, Socrates says, by the way, matching people up that can have, what was the word? Let's get it nailed down. This is the significance of right opinion. Intimacy. That's not how you spell it. Not found. Intimacy. Fine art to know as a midwife, hooking people up, which love unions will bring the rewards of intimacy and which will not. There you go. So a truly loving relationship, love and logos. Good heart, good mind. Get yourself a girl who can do both. That is a meme joke. Very funny. So, rejected by poor old Thomas. Thomas the tank engine. Thomas the incel. No, that's not. I'll take that one back. So you can find the divine hidden or absent in significant acts. In other words, you can engage in sexuality in a divine way that we've been outlining, or you can just use it to play out your pathologos fantasies and pour more energy into that. Doesn't sound like a great idea. Let's highlight this. And Socrates says, by the way, this guy, the model of human excellence, have a bunch of kids. And we're still pumping them out at 70. That's Ed Sheeran song. There's my guitar. Okay, I won't get distracted. Our love. Let me find the lyrics. I should have memorized this, because people want to hear it all the time. I usually wing it. Thinking out loud. Lyrics. And darling, I will be loving you till we're 70. And baby, my heart could still fall as hard at 23. And I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways, maybe just a touch of a hand. Oh me, I fall in love with you every single day, and I just want to tell you I am. I'm what? So honey now. And then he goes crazy. So, loving you till we're 70, just like Socrates. Shall I say, says Socrates, shall I say something else that's needed to explain man's ignorance? I have heard you were a lover, a father, a warrior, and said to be among the most wise. Now, to understand what blocks mankind from knowing himself may be a simple matter, and yet it's a mystery to most. What blocks man from knowing himself? We want to know. Simple matter, and yet a mystery to most. It is said that it is because man sins that he is blind to the goodness of the divine. I have an interest in this idea of sin, and I would like to learn more about it. Okay? Bullshit. Sin, bullshit. You already know this. We already slayed sin and the devil. You don't explain man's problems with sin. You're just a bad person, and I get to beat you because I'm a believer and I can only hurt people because that's what belief does. We called holding fast to a false belief as if it were true. That's the cause of man's ignorance. Holding fast to a false belief as if it were true. It is an error, a mistake, and even something you don't even recognize as a mistake. Yet it seems as if it is impossible to dismiss or avoid. It's obvious. What's the catchphrase of the most ignorant? Common sense. Every fascist politician doing fascist bullshit based on their false beliefs that they've never reflected on in their goddamn life. Just common sense. Hating women is just common sense. Doing a genocide is just common sense. Wealth inequality and the existence of billionaires stealing everyone's money, hoarding it, is just common sense. Common sense. So while we have a fantastic catchphrase that we understand, so it's not just a catchphrase, but still it's fun to have, for understanding the justification of fear of the mind and fear of self-reflection. Don't cause me to reflect. Don't demand understanding or not belief from me and my Zionist friends and my MAGA friends and my Abrahamic friends. I'm just a small bean. The small bean defense. Everything. It just comes down to that. But we recognize that as what a modern meme equivalent of this. A fundamental false belief about yourself and understanding and mind and rationality being not good enough. Not adequate. Impossible. Bullshit you got when you were too young to know better. Small bean. Got when you were a small bean, actually. The wee baby. Toddler. Still had to have language in order to come to a conclusion about yourself in this unsuspected way. So, the catchphrase or the meme used to dismiss self-reflection, I'm just a small bean, and the catchphrase used to justify that which is irrational, common sense. Common sense. Every single Republican politician, or fascist politician, or fascist right-wing Joe Rogan comedian, or fascist propagandist on the mainstream news networks and stuff. Just common sense. Which is infuriating. Yesterday, I was picking up my new guitar pedal and, having a conversation. And the second it got away from platitudes and slogans into actually reflecting on the nature of music and the difficulties that musicians have, and I've been having as a musician, gone. One guy stuck around to talk, but the other two gone. The other two staff members. It's not common sense. I wanted a common sense answer. They asked me a question about why did this particular person get angry at you doing well? And I said, well, it's the difference between belief and understanding. People who have understanding can create. People who are belief-based thinkers can't. They can only break. So this guy, seeing me engaging in understanding and creating through understanding music in a way that he is being blocked from, but he always wants to be a musician, a boomer, of course, a rich boomer, of course. Those are also two things that make it a more dangerous person. I don't know if he's a boomer, just an older guy. Therefore, furious. Belief versus understanding. And the guy's like, well, hang on a second. I would think if you were a musician, you would appreciate the music being played. Oh yeah, if you understand that. If you've never reflected on your false beliefs from your own parents who obviously crushed him when he was playing music, you just repeat it. Imitation. Now that requires a little bit of reflection, not just common sense. Oh, it's because he was this or that. It's because, probably just drunk. Probably just whatever. Gone. Common sense. common sense. Talk and function in a way that I am familiar or is common to me. And if you want to talk in that kind of a way, I'm just a small bean. Hey, new chatter. Welcome, Rocky. Every time you go live, you are both a performer and an audience, streaming yourself into a void that only exists because others choose to watch. The void exists because others choose to watch. If there were watchers, then it wouldn't be a void, right? But if their gaze defines your reality, woof, I should hope not, because gaze is physical, reality is non-physical. Reality is being. So the world of becoming, through our physical senses, where we get our beliefs, which cause our problems, physical world. But our mind can perceive reality. That's being, that's eternal. That's not a mind, but the mind. That's our object of focus in learning. And of course, as we make that jump, we have to recognize what it took to make that jump, because even that has to have a cause so we can go beyond it. Now, the other half of the game is recognizing the beliefs about self and reality that keep us below in our physical senses, keep us divided, keep us a manyness. And that's what we're talking about in the text. Some people, well, Plato says, the problems, the reason that we have problems and we're in ignorance is we forget reality. John says, was it John? The Gnostic the Gnostic Gospel of John, yes, says it's our forgetfulness of that and our passions. We passionately seek physical indulgences. And Thomas, the twin engine of Jesus, Jesus's twin brother, says it's a specific passion, sexual passion. And of course, people who want to make you slaves and are tyrants, fascists, pass on the idea of sin. You have problems because believe that yourself is bad. Believe you are a evil person. Sin. But what Socrates is saying, no. That's all garbage. It's a false belief that you have about yourself from childhood that you don't even recognize as false. It's just common sense to you. And you hold on to this false belief as if it were true, and it seems impossible to dismiss, and you don't even know that you've made a mistake. That's the cause of ignorance. What we call the pathologos. So if their gaze defines your reality, well, it doesn't, but keep going. Who are you when the camera is off? We want to ask the question, what am I? Because who is a question about beliefs, images. What story do you have about yourself? Now, if through the process of midwifery you are benefited, it is bequeathed a benefit, you realize that you don't need an image of yourself. In fact, every image or mask you have of yourself gets in the way of your development up this ladder. From the world of becoming, the physical world of senses, world of being, reality, which you perceive with ousia, the eye of the soul, or mind minding mind, and of course, the self, which is the cause even of that. So not a who question, a what. What is the self? But I get what you're saying. A lot of people in the physical world have an idea of themselves in a relational way. How do people relate to me? How do I relate to them? That's a role. Our fundamental belief about ourselves from childhood comes along with a role within the family. What's my role? And of course, you're also speaking to the idea of what it means to be a believer, because believers say, hey, I am the same. I can get over my sense of loneliness, my sense of being apart, by being a member of a whole when I'm at church, when I'm singing Kumbaya to Jesus, when I'm at the church picnics. But when I'm alone, I feel different. I still feel alone. I still feel like I'm a guilty person. I still feel guilt because I still believe I'm a sinner. I don't actually get true unity, because true unity or connectedness comes from being, which you can only get through understanding, dianoia in the Greek, and self-reflection, or ousia in the Greek. The very things that every single belief-based tradition rejects. You can't believe the guy in the funny hat and the white robes if you understand for yourself. You can't be a believing slave if you engage in self-reflection and learning. Then you might go beyond Jesus. But you're right. If you define yourself in terms of groups or beliefs or roles, when you're alone, you ask the question, what am I really? And that's why in this channel, we are learning what it means to understand and what it means to reflect on yourself in a way that opens you up and makes you receptive for knowing yourself as pure connection. Overcoming that sense of loneliness and ignorance of yourself by having knowledge. And overcoming that fear and guilt by applying understanding to free yourself from your beliefs. Going up is called philosophy, true philosophy. Removing your problems is called midwifery. That's what we do here. Good question. Nice reflection. Hope you find something fun in this channel if you stick around. So, right, we're told about this idea of sin, says Socrates. But actually, we say the cause of human ignorance is holding fast to a false belief as if it were true. It's an error. It's a mistake. And even something you don't even recognize as a mistake. Yet it seems as if it's impossible to dismiss or avoid. Common sense. Those that are impossible to avoid have become the subject of tragedy. The tragic hero, the fatal flaw. The fatal flaw of the tragedian. Ooh. Interesting. So hey, some pathologos, false beliefs, you might be able to step around. Oh, another chatter. Local Dadamin. Welcome. I don't think Christians know the Socratic method. Most arguments nowadays are either confirmation or confirmation bias I'm familiar with. Right? They're not following dialectic and understanding. They are just confirming their own opinions and false beliefs with each other. What's survivorship bias? Can you say more about that? I'm with you in that first part. So, some pathologos false beliefs. Fine-tuning. Say more, if you please. So the ones that you can't avoid and you play out is special because we are here. What does that mean? from a bias that say we are special because we are here. Like our particular false beliefs or faith must be right, otherwise they wouldn't be Christians. But couldn't you say the Muslims must be right, otherwise they wouldn't be Islam? I don't understand. So, the pathologos false beliefs that you take as common sense, that you can't avoid, you play out in the drama of a tragedy. We call it the fatal flaw of the tragedian. So tell me, how does sin, as Thomas views it, keep one from the divine luminosity and knowing the self? Keep one from the divine luminosity of being and knowing the self. Survivorship bias is kind of hard to describe, but it has to do with external observations versus an internal observation. I'm going to sneeze. I sneezed. And how internal observation is flawed based on what survives. Sorry for continuing. Oh, no. It takes time for people to chat and reflect. And I just continue to read as I give you time, because this is the whole point of this channel, is to get people thinking and having fun in reflection and understanding. But it's kind of difficult in chat, so I just keep reading anyway and give you time. So don't worry about that. I like this concept. Yeah, external observation versus internal observation, and how internal observation is flawed based on what survives. Interesting. Keep typing. Like, an internal observer only has access to their perspective. It came out of planes coming back in war, and how the ones that came back didn't need any armor. Didn't need armor they needed to examine what was taking down the planes, not the ones that survived. Oh, I see. Right. So let's put armor on these planes that came back. Seem to have bullet holes here and here and here. Let's put armor there. But really, they should have been saying, well, hang on, let's have a look at the ones that didn't survive, because they're the ones that needed the armor when they were hit. Interesting. Right. So, how do we accurately reflect on the cause of problems? By reflecting on not just your own experience, but the principles that apply to everyone. Hey, I've got no problem with MAGA. I'm not in a concentration camp. Hang on, what about the people that Trump's sending to concentration camps? Maybe look outside your own perspective. Interesting. So, how does, says Socrates to Jesus, how does Thomas the Twin Engine view sin stopping one from divine luminosity of knowledge and the knowing of the self? To answer that, I'll have to fill you in on the great sin, because for Thomas, there is another kind of sin, and this one you are most likely to reject. The greater is after hearing his teaching. The greater is if, after hearing his teaching, you dismiss it and scorn it and flee from it. Oh, look. Welcome. Thanks for following. Local. Some lovely hearts. For that dismissal, one descends into the depths of your Tartarus. Now, we have come across Tartarus in our reading of the Phaedo. We've read the Phaedo on this channel, and if you go to the YouTube, you can find the series on the Phaedo. We get all the way up to the final boss. We didn't keep reading because it was too complicated, and we had to go and do some side quests like this one to level up our understanding, to make sense of Plato's description of the realm of being that all souls go to when we die. And Tartarus is one of those places. So, descending into the depths of Tartarus, in the world of being that souls go to, a negative place. I'll sub and throw some watch time on the YouTube later. I like this vibe. Oh, neat. Neat. This is a banger of a book. This book, oh, it's a banger. So I throw them all up on YouTube, and you can go through playlists on different things. Mainly we read this kind of text to develop understanding. We read a book called Philosophical Midwifery, which is that same structure of understanding we're learning applied to surfacing and removing our false beliefs. The only form of psychotherapy that has been empirically proven to work, by the way. So it's a banger of a book. We also do a little bit of dream analysis. We've only got a couple of episodes of that, but we are learning from this book the significance of dream analysis as a guide for both developing your evolution and freeing yourself from what's false. But one of our questions is in this book, if dream analysis is so goddamn important, how do you do it? There is no book on it yet. So maybe that's our job. Maybe it's our job on this channel to write the book on dream, not interpretation, but analysis. Because it seems to be our guide. So, Thomas has two ideas of sin. The first one is whatever is sin. Christian burned any of them, I bet. Yes. Yeah. Which is a difficulty that we're facing. We are... And, by the way, and the Athenians murdered Socrates. So you'll see, if you go through this series, you'll see a lot about how we've devolved from the Hellenics. Socrates' teacher Parmenides and Diotima, who was a lady, who taught Socrates. But then before he could teach midwifery to Plato, we killed him. So while Plato understood a lot about philosophy, he didn't have midwifery, which is giving birth to the false beliefs that prevent our development. And that's we got it on the board actually. We have the earliest philosopher we know about is Xenophanes. All we have is a quote or like a little fragment, and it's a question that you can carry as a koan or a spiritual thing to carry with you in your day that keeps you curious and open to insight. What is the whole that is seeing and hearing right now? Not the individual things, not discerning foreground from background, but what is the whole of it? Well, here's the thing. This is the earliest thinker. These were not sophists yet. This guy was legit. Now, back then, there wasn't a philosophy. It was just the philosophy. Like, there isn't different philosophies on how to fix an engine. There's just understanding an engine. Same with understanding medicine. It's just anyone can understand it. It's not a belief. It's not an opinion. So too with the nature of self and reality. So we have, so same thing with hearing. If you try to perceive, not by discerning individual sounds or individual foreground and background and sight, but the whole, what's that? What's the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking? Now, he taught Parmenides, and we have the conversation that Socrates had when he was about 20 with Parmenides, who was about 60 at the time. And Parmenides taught Socrates the dialectic. And we have some episodes on the Parmenides on the channel. You can check that out on YouTube. Socrates' other teacher was Diotima, a lady. So while Parmenides taught Socrates and us the purely rational method of the dialectic, Diotima taught Socrates how to employ that with our human desire for beauty or love, so that we can use it to progress to higher and higher levels of beauty through love and understanding, love and logos. You love that I have this huge blackboard. Yeah, it's neat. So, love and logos together. Logos is a Greek word that means, well, a lot of things, but understanding, words, language, the understandable, intelligible pattern of everything that we can apprehend through understanding and experience directly in knowledge. Diotima says, hey, that experience of reality as knowledge, it's also the experience of beauty itself, the cause of beautiful things. In the physical world, you see adjectives, beautiful puppy, beautiful streamer, beautiful painting. But beauty itself is an aspect of pure consciousness, which is outside of time. So we call it the realm of being, when the physical world is the world of becoming. So if you pursue beauty, eventually, if you do it in an ordered, structured way, you will prepare your mind to perceive beauty itself. Therefore, the process of enlightenment or spiritual development or learning is love and logos, what we call philodianoia, love of understanding. So that's Diotima. Right, that's the question. What is the whole of mind? What is mind itself? And that experience of beauty itself is mind knowing itself. And the word for that in Greek is ousia, the capacity your mind has to turn about and know itself directly as pure being, or beauty itself. Now, from that experience of pure beauty, knowing yourself as eternity outside of time, then you have to, all of that understanding you've been developing to get there, you have to make use of it to reflect on even it. Yes, there are pretty words in the Greek, I agree. Ousia. Now, the word for this development of understanding that applies to being is dianoia. So philos means love, dianoia, love and logos, philodianoia. So all of this understanding you've been using as your spiritual method from Socrates' teacher Diotima that we're reading about in the symposium. Now we have a good translation for the first time in a long time, so that's neat. With the actual Greek. You apply that understanding to this experience of bliss or pure beauty to wonder about what's the cause of that. That's the self. There's a self. If this is beauty itself, just as there are many beautiful things, we ask what is beauty itself. But if this knowledge experience is beauty itself, justice itself, goodness itself, what's the self that applies to all of them? So that's the symposium from Socrates' teacher Diotima. Here's the issue. That's the Hellenic tradition. That's just philosophy, using your mind to know your mind. It's not a team. It's not Kant's philosophy or Hegel's philosophy. No, not yet. It's just philosophy. So this love of understanding has three aspects. Philosophy, which is that, but also that method of development or the dialectic that we got from Parmenides, you can apply it to the problems that come up as you make that journey. That's what we're reading in the text right now. How do we solve the problems that block us from enlightenment and keep us in ignorance, pardon me, that use of the dialectic to free yourself from what's false is philosophical midwifery, giving birth to your false beliefs. So philosophy and midwifery. But hey, you can't really do those unless you're listening to your spirit guide. That's the dream maker. The dream maker gives you dreams, and you can unpack the meaning of dreams through the same dialectic, the structure of understanding. And that's the dialectic here. There are 4 categories. And by the way, you have to test your learning in experience to see if you're free of your problems from midwifery, to see if you're developing true understanding in philosophy. Talk with your friends, invite them to coffee, talk about your dreams with them, create works of art that reflect your insights and understanding. That's mythology. So those are the 4 aspects of the new way of being all human beings are here to discover. The movement from belief-based thinking to understanding-based thinking, philodianoia, has 4 aspects. The dialectic applied to the truth, philosophy applied to what's false, midwifery applied to both, dream analysis and sharing it, mythology. Those are the 4 aspects of philodianoia. Have a nice local dive bar that I talk to old timers at. Ooh. Interesting to see how you go. Now, one of the questions of the book we're reading right now is, if this is for everyone, why is it so difficult to communicate to it? Sorry, to communicate it to others. In other words, both these teachings of Socrates and the other character in the book is Jesus, both of these people have a new teaching, but everyone who tried to speak for them interpreted it in a different way. So modern Christians do not believe in Jesus. They believe in Paul's teachings. And Paul completely rejected everything Jesus said. And Socrates says, how come Christians are so dumb? And we haven't answered that question yet. So we have Paul, who was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Yes, meta-analysis. So it's not just sharing the truth, but people's reactions to truth. Hopefully we can see that there are a stage, there's a paradigm or a set of stages that represent all the different ways human beings react to new truth. So some people just dismiss it right out. Like if you ever tried to talk to a MAGA, oh no, get out of here. Understanding, I just have my beliefs, or a racist or something. No, it's just common sense. So they reject new understanding completely. There are some like Paul who claim to speak for the truth, but they just keep their old beliefs. There are some that take a little bit of understanding and use it as a patchwork for beliefs, like the Kabbalah that takes Parmenides and puts it into some religious thinking. And then we have this new class that tries to synthesize understanding and beliefs. So we're developing, and of course at the top, just take the understanding and just get rid of your beliefs. You don't need them. They're false. Beliefs are false and they cause of problems. Understanding is true and anyone can play. Right. That's the thing. Yeah, how do you avoid the people who are closed? But then how do you guide people who are open and curious with a good heart and good mind? How do you help them through their stages of reaction to truth? Because maybe it's just a human thing. Anyway, so that's what we had. But we killed Socrates when his student Plato was too young to have gone through midwifery, which means when we killed Socrates, Plato kept philosophy. Yeah, rip, R.I.P. the goat. But the official charge that the government used to murder Socrates was he was against the official religions of Homer. Homer, the story of Achilles especially, shows somebody going through dream analysis and philosophical midwifery to address their false beliefs from childhood and go from the worst man, Achilles, the worst person, to a good person. So, Plato didn't want a bar of that. So we lost dream analysis and we lost philosophical midwifery. But also, we murdered Socrates. In the Phaedo, he says, "My dreams have been telling me I need to write stories. I need to create myths that mythologically, through drama and characters, share my understanding and vision, share the logos." So when we killed Socrates, we lost mythology, dream analysis, midwifery, and we only had some philosophy. That's Plato. Still good that we have some. We have the conversations that Socrates had with Parmenides, so that's great. We had the conversations with Diotima, that's great. But here's the thing. Plato started the first academy, the first universities in the West, in the academy. His student was Aristotle. Now, why is it we have to have all four of these things? Because as we pursue the truth through understanding of self and reality, philosophy, our fundamental false beliefs from childhood surface to block you. And the pathologos, the sick beliefs, the sick logos, is more powerful than enlightenment experiences. People have had near-death experiences and mushroom experiences and traumatic experiences and all sorts of yoga experiences, but give them a week or two, they're back into their problems. So you have the archetypes, like Goku has the sage, but he's still a pervert, the pervy sage. Naruto has a pervy sage too. There are archetypes of the drunken master, still have their alcohol problems. And by the way, having an experience of being doesn't mean understanding it. You don't know what level you've experienced. And of course, you are not understanding its cause, the self. So what? Well, that means that his students learning philosophy will also have blocks. Meaning your teacher better know dream analysis and midwifery, otherwise your students' blocks are going to take over. That's exactly what happened with Aristotle. So Aristotle removed the last part of philodianoia, the love of understanding. We lost these three with killing Socrates, and we lost this because Plato wasn't able to midwife Aristotle. That gives us the Roman tradition. This is modern philosophy. The Roman tradition, not the Greek. Modernism, materialism, because philosophy removes metaphysics, the study of being. It's all about the physical world. Torture nature, reveal her secrets, and use that knowledge to manipulate people in the physical world. That's all you need. That's the cause of our fate. It binds us to playing out the ignorance of our pathologos false beliefs. Inevitably, like an NPC in a script, like a zombie, you can only say and do one thing. That's the cause of our repeating problems and our suffering. And that will be the cause of our extinction of our human species. Because without these three things, these four things, mythology, dream analysis, midwifery, and philosophy, philodianoia, love and logos, we can't solve problems and we can't understand the truth of the logos, the paradigm of reality, which we must align our human laws to, so that our human laws and our human functionings are in harmony and alignment with reality, with the cosmos. Otherwise, we go extinct. That's from Aristotle. So just as modern Christians reject everything Jesus says because they follow Paul, a wolf in sheep's clothing, claiming to speak for Jesus, so too do modern philosophers completely reject everything of philosophy, think they're doing philosophy because they listen to Aristotle, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Our job is to go from fate, suffering, and extinction through materialism, modern philosophy, stoicism, to rediscovering our purpose, philodianoia, that will take us from fate to destiny, That's the meaning of life for everyone, not just a part, for everyone. That's the new way of being of man. Philodianoia. Our task on this channel is to understand that, become it, practice it for ourselves in the way that we relate through philodianoia in this new way to ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, to be a friend to ourselves, to be a good leader and guide to ourselves, in our relationships, because this is what it means to have a loving relationship. Love without understanding is dangerous because you're just going to force your bullshit beliefs on the other person. But if you do have love and logos, you do have relationships bound by understanding, you can use it as a means, like Diotima says, for enlightenment. True intimacy. So we want to know how to relate to ourselves in this way, how to relate to others and to our relationships in this way, and our friends in this way, over coffee. Cheers. But also this text asks, hang on a second, if this is for everyone, how do we communicate it? Because that's a difficult thing. Humans are not computers. You can't just program in truth and understanding and rationality. Because we are in conflict with our beliefs, this conflict between belief and understanding means that everyone is going to be somewhere along this continuum. How strong is your beliefs? Are you a mega racist Nazi MAGA person? Are you a genocidal Zionist? In which case, you are going to be so tied to your beliefs, you're going to reject any evidence. Netanyahu is murdering reporters. They're just trying to share evidence and reason. You will kill. That's what believers can't create. They can only kill. They can only destroy. You need understanding to make a computer. You need to understand a computer to make a computer. You need to understand music to play music. Believers can't. They can only destroy. Be careful if you come across a musician at your gig who is learnt through belief. They will fuck with you. So that's all they can do. The reason they are still in belief and not understanding is because they've been fucked with by their parents. And their parents by their parents, and their parents by their parents, all the way back to caveman days. The origin of this blind loyalty to false belief kept human beings alive before we had language. It kept us from leaving the cave. Everything outside the cave is bad and scary. So we didn't get eaten by saber-toothed tigers, but now that's the nature of Nazism and MAGAism. Hey, those brown people don't look like your family. They are M13s. We should genocide them. Those Palestinians don't look like your family or think like your family. Let's kill all the Palestinian children. Trump's not a Christian, but he knows that he can manipulate people who are believers because that's how fucking stupid belief is. Belief has to reject understanding and self-reflection, or ousia. You can't have belief and understanding. They are incompatible. And why would you want to believe someone else? Because belief is from others if you can understand it for yourself. Because you see through understanding. Therefore, as we learn this, and if it's part of our job to share it as best we can, we have to also recognize what are the stages of responding favorably to new understanding, happy face, and happy face, and responding negatively by killing thinkers, hating understanding, fearing the mind, silencing reflection, to be loyal to false beliefs. Boo. We've got Paul here. We've got Mark a little bit further along. We've got the Gnostic Gospel of John and Twin Thomas in here somewhere. We've got Plato a little bit further along. But we need to build a list because that's understanding. And if we have understanding of the ways human beings react to truth, we can artfully present it in a way that makes it fun and interesting, But also recognize, hey, if you're reacting negatively, that's fine. That's just a level of development. You're not in charge, Putin and Trump, but we can still help you. You don't give the guns to the people who don't understand. You don't let the people who don't understand medicine do surgery. But you can still do surgery on people who don't understand. They can still be benefited by those who do understand. That's important. We are learning to be leaders. We are learning to be dialecticians and midwives of ideas. So we need to find a list of classes of reactions to truth, recognize them as stages of development, and learn the gentle, charming, fun art of guiding people through that development to benefit them. But most importantly, to benefit ourselves, because we will also be going through all of these stages. Most people who come across this channel leave. Some come back after some time. It's a relationship. It's a conversation. And the guide is your dream maker. So as we learn the language of understanding, we're also learning the language of our dreams. And that's the most important relationship that you can open up to. It will help you in addressing your false beliefs and perfecting your own understanding. And hey, if you want to have a good conversation over coffee, talking about understanding is great, philosophy. Doing midwifery to remove false beliefs is great too, but you can supercharge those conversations if you're doing dream analysis first. Because the clues and the guidance to those fundamental activities you get in dreams. So those are the questions we're carrying. Number one, if this is our goal, what does it feel like? What's the state of mind or state of existence of being an understanding? That's a question. As we read, we collect questions as we read. That's to carry a question is to be on a quest. What's the state of mind of understanding? And another question is, how do we understand all of the different stages of reaction to understanding so that we can master it and use it to benefit ourselves and others? Another question is, if dreams supercharge this whole thing, what's the language of dreams? How exactly do you apply the dialectic to dreams to get the benefit from dreams? Another question is, if this is obvious when you say it and true and helpful and beneficial and necessary, why is it so hard to teach people? So those are the questions we're carrying as we read. Let me catch up on the chatty chat. Life is deterministic without self-reflection. Exactly. You say trapped in the zombie virus of the pathologos. Paul is sus. Absolutely. Killed a whole bunch of them, then said, I am the last word. Exactly. That's what he said. What a jerk. Humans are not truly rational yet. We have the capacity. Did you see the statement from the CDC lady? Oh, what did the CDC's lady say? I haven't thought about dreams for a while. Yes. Again, we're rediscovering the significance of the logos, dianoia, and dreams. She hasn't been fired or quit. What happened with who is the CDC lady? Center of Disease Control? Did that, I am the one who's telling children to not take the vaccine. Did that guy try and get her fired because that guy loves diseases, apparently? Hates vaccines, but loves diseases? He seems to have eaten all of them. RFK, that's the guy. Thought so. She's brand new. And RFK is trying to get rid of her. Right. So what we're seeing, so this allows us to understand what we're seeing in our current world too. We are simply seeing the playing out of what follows, or what's the stakes, or what's the significance of not addressing the difference between Socrates and Aristotle. What happens if we as a species stay in Aristotle's belief-based thinking, physical world-based thinking, and not do our job and go from belief to understanding? Well, we allow politicians and clergy to be believers. We never allow pilots to not have understanding and knowledge. Never allow a mechanic not to have understanding. Why is it that they're the only jobs for people who reject understanding and say, well, it's my belief, are politicians and kings? And why are they given the most power? We need to demand philosophical midwifery and dream analysis, as well as an understanding of the truth of self and reality, and its understanding its parts as the paradigm for all universal principles. We need to, as citizens, do our best to understand this, so we must demand a freedom from pathologos and an wisdom or knowledge and understanding of the true nature of reality from every single political and spiritual leader. Otherwise, we are seeing what we see now. The most ignorant, harmful, sadistic human beings play out their sadism and ignorance in the world. So we have a moral obligation for ourselves to master Philodianoia, because we also play out our injustice from our childhood without suspecting it, but also so we can be good citizens and demand that standard freedom from problems and understanding of truth from all political and spiritual leaders. Dreams have to be the loud cries from the subconscious. I may have to think about this for superconscious. Sub means it's below, but it's more super. It's the mind itself. Now, don't believe me. Take it as a question or a hypothesis. So, it's all about being on a quest. In your inventory, you've got a question sack that you carry your questions in as you go. But also, you might come up with theories. Understanding isn't knowledge. You put them in your if sack. If this is the case, you don't have to be a religious person and pick favorite. I like this belief. I'm going to say I am a Mormon. No. Don't identify with a hypothesis. Carry it and see what happens. See what works. You have to test your understanding and experience. So is the mind is a question. Is dreams subconscious or superconscious? Or consciousness itself? So now we've got 3 hypotheses you can carry with you as you learn to understand your dreams. Question sack and if sack, you carry them in your inventory. Because this is the archetype for all heroes' journeys. Every video game, every mystery novel, every movie is a shadow of this, the hero's journey. Yes, that's what we're taught. By the way, we just read that. You'll love this book. So as we saw, we're on a new section here, but we just got to the end of this one. And after we read a section, there's the chorus and the anti-chorus that speak up. Listen to the chorus response we're up to page 79. Listen to the chorus. They say, "Here is another so-called analysis, and it's as empty can be. Analogies, phooey on them. You can do anything with them, but none of it can be confirmed. The cornerstone of Christianity, Paul, is dismissed with a few words. He is the one who made the resurrection perfectly clear. Wake up and look instead of shouting nonsense. First off, there was a resurrection. It's a simple fact, undeniable as it is. How can all those witnesses be wrong? Behind all your blah blah is nothing but a doubting Thomas. As for Aristotle, that's easy. Once you realize all this talk about enlightenment will not save your soul, then you can see the truth. Dump this philosophy and master nature. Mastering nature gives you the power to manipulate her, torture her to get her secrets out of her. That's what experiments is. Simply torture. What you really need to do is drop your philosophy. Then you'll see you only need a practical approach that's free of all the ambiguity of philosophy. What's that? That's Aristotle. You don't need anything more once you've got faith. And you need faith because of the failure of understanding. Because of the failure of understanding, we are just too weak for the task of understanding. We are just small beings. Now that wasn't what I was looking for. The previous chorus was about dreams. Here we go. The chorus is like the haters, like the doubts that come up as we read. Yes. Here we go. The roots of folly are now celebrated by a fool and preached to the blind, gaining insights into reality from dreams? It's not just absurd, it's totally and completely ridiculous. Belief in dreams makes fools of us all. Dreams are impossible to understand because they're just leftover debris from our past. There is no ultimate anything. Ultimate cloaks, ultimate fictions. Phooey is ultimate when it comes out of the mouths of philosophers. Don't talk about the mind. There is no such thing. It's only a brain, buzzing around impressions of things. Words without a physical reference are just empty sounds screaming into the wind. Because our words are about being, beauty itself, mind itself. These aren't physical, they're the cause of the physical. They're the nouns that give us our adjectives, beautiful puppy, beautiful painting, so on. The anti-chorus comes in, hey, instead of shouting meaningless phrases, haters, why don't you see if you can learn what you believe is impossible? Listen to yourself and ask where your shouts come from. What propels your own nonsense? Here it is. Fear of the mind drives your own absurdities. So quiet down and listen. Put your fear of being fooled aside. The fool fears his being a fool, and that keeps him foolish. And the anti-chorus response to that first thing that we read. Now it's your turn to listen, haters. It is true that analysis is empty, but all you need to know is what it's empty of. Go back again to what has been said and see if this analysis is empty of interpretations. Analysis is empty of interpretations that are foreign to the work. It's as painful to realize you have been persuaded to believe what's manifestly false as it is to realize you have undergone suffering of your own making. Wake up from your folly, put aside these deniers of truth, Paul and Aristotle, and seek your freedoms in the truth you discover about yourself. Face it, you're afraid to look at yourself. So really reflecting what we've been talking about here in chat. So a little bit of a review and summary of where we're at. But here we have Socrates says, therefore, the unsuspected false beliefs from childhood that we take as real or common sense and our fear to reflect on ourselves because we're just a small being, which is itself a false belief about yourself. You are not a small being. You are not inadequate. It's a false belief based in fear of the mind and reason. That's the cause of problems that we can overcome through understanding and midwifery. But let me hear this idea of sin. And Jesus said, okay, let me tell you what sin is. Let's listen to Thomas here. There is two sins. The greater sin is not believing Thomas, by the way. So, okay, to answer that question of sin, I'll have to fill you in on the great sin. Because for Thomas, there is another greater kind of sin, and this one you are most likely to reject. The greater is, if after hearing his teaching, you dismiss it, scorn it, and flee from it, because for that dismissal, one descends into the depths of what you call Tartarus, what they might call hell. The other, which is more pervasive and engulfs all of mankind, is sexual intercourse.
Whore.
And passion.
I'm cute. Like, it's cutie pie.
You are a fantastic boy.
Is this chat full of disgusting? I'm so disgusted.
Disgusting. Says Thomas the twin engine. Twin of Jesus. Okay, so the problem is sexual intercourse and passion, says Thomas. These teachings are told to Matthew by Thomas. And in his report, I am seen as if I am instructing him. So, in the story of Thomas, which seems to be closer to the teachings of Jesus, being his brother and everything, twin, and closer to the Hellenic tradition of understanding, it's almost as if he still has his own pathologos. He told, hey, here's the problem: sex, passion. Oh, and by the way, Jesus told me. Right you are, says Socrates. I would reject the idea that love expressed through bodily desires and sin is sin. So Socrates would reject that. Love expressed through bodily desires is sin. Bollocks to you. So Thomas, the twin engine of Thomas the Incel. Now, those who are free of these two kinds of sin, those who are free of these two kinds of sin must reach the heavens. Okay, you've removed the sin of sexual passion and sexual intercourse, and you've removed the sin of not believing Thomas. So do you go to the heavens? How is that described? Thomas says that those who reach this exalted state become unified with the most holy King of Kings. He goes on to say, however, that it is essential to know thyself. So he's still trying to keep his beliefs and some understanding too. Now, what questions do you have for me? My question is, what kind of Reddit community do you belong to, you incel freak? No, that's not in the text. It is curious that he could believe that after coming to know thyself, one would be celibate. It also lacks a description, since being unified with the King of Kings is hardly a description. Further, lacks a description, and he obviously doesn't know thyself if that's his belief. Further, it is difficult to believe that these stories of the resurrection, final judgment, and apocalypse were known by Thomas and the others and were simply ignored. Could Thomas in writing about you have known these things and simply chose to ignore them? For if he knowingly rejected that, we must ask, what higher purpose could he have in mind when he skipped over these events in his account? So, these terrible, like the most awful shit that we have in Christian mythology, raising from the dead, final judgment, and the thing that a lot of people are actively seeking, trying to bring the world to an end so Jesus comes back in his final judgment, the most fucking terrible shit. He asks, hey, did Thomas knowingly choose to ignore it? Or was it not even known at his time? That's a question. Jesus. You continue your reflections, determined to seek out the truth. Now, you are in the same boat as I am, since your question and doubts have turned us both around. As you know, Thomas, the twin, was my brother, and among my followers, he was the closest to me. Brother, twin, closest to Jesus. We drank from the same sacred source. It is true that his gospel has no arrest, no trial, no crucifixion, and no resurrection. These four major events are not part of Thomas, and neither are they in the common material shared by Matthew and Luke. And that is called Q. Here we go. We have the emergence of Mr. Q. Dr. Q? Professor Q? What is it in James Bond Q? Oh, he's just Q. Oh. All right. This is significant because the material of Q is dated earlier than either gospel, since it's been dated around 5 AD. Key. Clearly, these four events were added later to the accounts of the Gospels. This is key. So we have a tragic story of Jesus written by Mark, no crucifixion, no resurrection. Actually, fitting the model of the tragic hero, except for the recognition or the realization at the end where he realized he had a problem. Nope. Pathetic hero. God, why have you forsaken me? Now, that's copied by Matthew and Luke, but they also add stuff, and what's common in what they add is Q. And the material of Q that they both drew from to add their own versions, copied some of Mark, added this other stuff, is earlier than the other Gospels. So, not only was the resurrection, the Easter story, not part of the early stuff, neither was the trial, the crucifixion, and of course no resurrection. So no arrest, no trial, no crucifixion, and we already know there was no resurrection. These additions sprung from the transfiguration experiences that Mark introduced into his gospel, and the other two gospels shared it. But the transfiguration experience is not in the Gospel of John. Ooh. My ministry was said to have taken a severe change after that dialogue between Moses, Elijah, and me. So he has that brilliant light experience. Moses and Elijah comes out of the light and they have a chat. And one of the problems of Mark is he didn't describe what they talked about. Ooh. For surely, as interpreters fly in different directions, so this signals a basic change in my presumed ministry. Interesting. If Thomas didn't get the whole of it right, what of the work of James? The Gnostic Gospel of James won favor among those who sought an entry into the kingdom of God through understanding parables. That's Jimmy, James. His way was to bring people to the kingdom by urging them to become perfect and be filled with the Spirit. He stresses the importance of experiencing the divine light and urged his followers to understand not only the parables but what the light is. So that seems closer to what we've been learning in philosophy. Remember, where's our ontology, if you fancy? Experiencing it plus the understanding. We call wisdom in the text, experiencing it and understanding it in depth. And it sounds like James is on board with that idea. Yes! The most brilliant light of being is also the goal of many of our seekers. Did he advance other ideas? Yes, Socrates. And he does continue to preach about Satan. Oh, God. Okay. What? As does James. We were talking about James. Maybe he's saying Thomas as well. All right. He does continue to preach about Satan, as does James. So this would be James and Thomas the Incel. And they both need to believe in the cross and in my death. What? From this we can say he continues several core beliefs of the canonic Gospels. Curious, is it not, Socrates, that in stressing the need to remember, both while awake and asleep, that he becomes part of your tradition? Is this an attempt to bridge or unite two different traditions? So, some differences and some sameness. Dreams, but also remembering, which would be remembering being. And I guess remembering your quest. Can you practice what we're doing here to the point where you become free of any other false image of yourself, and you've embraced this as a way of being so that you can even take it with you into your dreams? Wouldn't that be neat? It could be an attempt to bridge or unite our two different traditions. But I would need to know more about how his followers carried out that practice, because it has echoes back to the importance of remembering and possibly dream work. It looks like he adds to the work and retains some of the core beliefs. From this, I can conclude that he is another Gnostic gospel writer who rejects Paul. Thank God for that. However, while I say this, I am not at all sure I can say what the core saving belief of Paul's teaching is. How are we for time? All right, maybe we'll leave it there. We'll leave it on a cliffhanger. What is the core saving belief of Paul? Read a lot today and some great reflections and some great new chatters. Thank you for joining us today and following along. You can follow along on YouTube and Twitch. You can find the old videos on YouTube in playlists. You can join the Discord. There's a link below. And you can get a notification when we go live. And you can find a link to the text below as well. So our question for next time, along with the other ones we've been carrying, is what is the core saving belief of Paul's teaching? And we have some new players on the field. We have Thomas the Twin Engine, the Incel. And we have James, Jimmy James, who both of who seem to, well, not have those four elements: the arrest, the trial, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. But they seem to still want to keep some ideas like Satan and the idea of sin. So they seem to wanting to be to mesh understanding with belief together. And also with that comes along their own beliefs. Earthly passions or sexual expression of love and intimacy as problems. Why? Socrates didn't think that. We don't think that. Diotima doesn't think that. So a bit of a mishmash. And of course, we have a new player on the field, Mr. Q. That which is common between Matthew and Luke that they copied from, that they added to the story of Mark. The pathetic hero's tale of Mark, also denying Paul the denier, so Mark the denier of the denier, copied by Matthew and Luke. What's common, we call that Q. And that's been dated to around 50 AD, so a lot earlier than the other guys. So, and we can see the implications of meshing belief in with understanding. As we've been seeing time and time again, our purpose is a evolutionary cognitive development from belief-based cognition to understanding. We're curious about what it feels like to be in it. And if it's itself a shadow of something, what's it a shadow of? And how can you be functioning in time while having a state of mind outside of time? That's a puzzle. But what happens if you try and mix the two together? So we make jokes on this channel. Yes, I understand that for all other religions, but not my religion. All other parents, but not my parents. All other time periods, but not my time period. All other cultural false beliefs, but not my cultural false beliefs. Sounds fucking stupid, but it's very, very common. It's normal, it's human. Because we have not reflected on our earliest images of beauty that we take as truth. Parental figures. But here we're seeing the significance of that. Of trying to do philosophy without midwifery. Of trying to do them, but we're trying to do philosophy without dream analysis and midwifery. You'll try and save the ones you're attached to. Sexuality is wrong. Passions is wrong. Not agreeing with me blindly, like Thomas said, is a greater sin. You go to hell. By the way, sounds like something his fucking dad probably would have said to him. Hey, my house, my rules. Thomas is still copying that. Thus, we are seeing the significance of people trying to have their cake and eat it too, in a negative way. because we talk about the state of self as having your coffee and drinking it too, because it's not something you have to fall out of. While knowledge is an experience and therefore has an end, you can't drive your car in that brilliant light, but the purity and clarity and openness and freedom, that could be a state. And as we saw in the text last time, that state can function through pure mind, just as its shadow, understanding, is in a state of being of pure mind out of time while functioning in time. Maybe we're still working on that question and hypothesis, but we're seeing what happens if we don't do midwifery as well. We've been saying our moral obligation for ourselves and our relationships and our functioning in the world is to do midwifery. But we're also saying you can't do philosophy or you can't seek enlightenment or spirituality or personal development without also doing midwifery. So it's necessary. Otherwise, you fall into the problems that we're seeing here. Jimmy, James, Thomas the Incel tank engine, the twin, and even Plato. And definitely Aristotle. So, super interesting. And we also said, by the way, there might even be a civic duty, responsibility to go through midwifery and philosophy, and dream analysis seems to be the engine now. It's gone from something we've been referring to something that supercharges our conversations with others and our work to something central now. Socrates seems to really be leaning on it as central now, to the point where you can even test your development to see whether or not you can remember what you're doing even while asleep. But hey, wouldn't you want to take what you're learning with you beyond this lifetime? Could that be a good test exercise? Super interesting stuff. And by the way, civic duty for doing that so we can demand it of any leader in a political or spiritual position. The jobs that we allow the most harmful, sadistic, ignorant fuckheads to have as jobs right now. Politicians and clergy. The only jobs where you can, and parent, where you can just say, well, it's my belief, I don't have to have understanding. Terrible stuff. Therefore, civic duty to get into the game of midwifery and philosophy. And dreams. And of course, we're seeing historically and currently in the playing out of how historic consequences of this, what happens if you don't. If you neglect philosophy, you just seek personal development or philosophy. You'll try and marry the two together. Hegelian dialectic. Synthesis of antithesis and thesis. Garbage. So, cliffhanger is, well, okay, well, if Paul just made up a whole bunch of crap, what's his saving teaching? What's the saving belief behind Thomas is, don't have sex and don't ever disagree with me. Mark seems to be understand enlightenment and do not use your do not leave your beliefs unexamined. You have a pathetic end. But what's Paul saying then? What does Paul say the core saving belief is? Tune in next time for the answer. Thank you for joining me on this quest, because
You're a wizard, Harry.
you're a wizard, Harry, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.